Hey there, low as fuck energy, Borley Borelstein here to talk inanely about Parasite, which I saw over the weekend. I've wanted to see Parasite for a while. It seemed like a pretty cool film. I like the trailer. I like the trailer so much actually that I stopped watching it because I'm like, oh, I'm already sold, and I don't want to see anything from later in the film because something that's a personal hang up of mine is that I hate when I have teased information from later in the film and then I try to put together like, oh, how is that gonna work? And you already start kind of forming a concept of the story without actually having any kind of context of the scenes that actually happened in the trailer. So you start filling in the gaps, and it creates expectations of the film that may or may not really be valid, and it can skew your appreciation of the film. So I like to watch trailers as little as possible, which obviously calls into question how the fuck do I find anything worth watching? And the question or the answer to that is really, well, I don't. I watch a lot of garbage. And there are certain films where I see parts of them. I'm like, I don't know what the film's about, but I saw this one scene and it looks it looks good enough to watch to me. So that was my experience getting interested into Parasite. Parasite's pretty good film. It's a little hard as a Bakagaishin to appreciate it because Korean is a lot harder to listen to than Japanese, for me personally. I don't know about anybody else, but Korean actually kind of sounds like, I don't know, whatever language Hmong people speak. I grew up with uh, a decent one among people in my community, and it kind of, I don't mean to sound racist or anything. I mean this with whatever frank way I can say it without being racist, is that it sounds like noises and yelling and a kind of like a lot of not slurred but like held like vowels or something. Like you like nishiwa na na like, but like you say like one of those like parts like very long that like I can't think of like an English word that you would hold a part of the word for so long. But that's kind of how they end their sentences. Uh, in my experience with hanging out with Hmong families, that's what I've kind of come to hear. So Korean kind of sounds like that. So for me, is a little jarring to hear. I thought the translation on Netflix seemed pretty good. I have no idea how to really compare it, but it seemed like they did a good mix of like where they had colloquialisms of like Korean, but then translated it into English, and you can kind of understand it, but it's still like kind of weird. Like in Italian, to say good luck, you say in bocca al lupo, and the response is crepe, which is in the mouth of the wolf, and then crepe, which is just one word. Like if you did a literal translation, it doesn't make sense, but the figurative translation is, you're walking into the mouth of the wolf, and then crepe is like may the wolf choke or something like that, or chip his tooth or whatever, choke and die, that so that you'll survive, right? Which is a very strange way of saying good luck, and that context matters. And this film, I think, maintained the colloquialisms in a contextual sense to like you could understand a broader context of their culture from them, even though they're obviously translated in English in a way that's like you can understand what they're going for, but you're still kind of scratching your noggin like, wow, that's pretty weird. And then it kind of causes you to question your own colloquialisms that seem to be pretty fucking absurd and strange. And I don't really have too many offhand, but I think a lot of colloquialisms in English seem to relate upon just capitalism in a way, kind of, where, you two birds, one stone. I'm sure there's other ones that people can think of that essentially there's some kind of payoff for whatever you're doing in some meaningful kind of a capitalist idea of you have some kind of investment and you have some kind of payout, right? And yeah. So the film's music is pretty good. It doesn't get in the way. I was never annoyed by it. I felt like it kept the tension. The sound design was, I think, really good too. I think those are both like 9 out of 10s. I'm not sure on the acting. I think I really have a hard time judging foreign film acting because I don't know what is the norm of acting from where they are. So like films where I think the acting is kind of but like I've seen a decent amount of Italian foreign films, and I would rate their acting higher because I need to give credit towards it being a different culture of acting. And Asian films, I think, have a very different form of being dramatic in film that personally I really don't like, but it's a different culture. So I would say the acting in this film was not annoying. I usually find Asian horror films to have some of the most annoying acting in any film ever. In this film, I didn't think any of the characters were annoying, so I would say the acting is pretty fucking good. It's a strange kind of film because there's essentially not a main character. It's, I think, well, the family is the main character, the family unit, but it kind of tricks you in the beginning, making it seem like it's going to be the son, and that's a way to pull you in. But it isn't entirely his story, and he isn't, you don't solely follow him. I mean, you begin with him and you end with him, which is a good way to start the movie and a good way to end the film. So that was a good design. I mean, the overall structuring of the film is impressive. This film doesn't just tell a story about, you know, poor people working to get by. You know, it's not just a story that is solely a story. It has, you know, implications to our current world. It, you know, presents characters who are poor, who have the ability to succeed. They have the ability, as we are shown in the film, as many, lower class people do. But the problem is that there is just no opportunity, and that's why I think this film rails home the best is that the metaphorizing or the analogies that, well, no, it's more the metaphors. The metaphors that the film presents are so kind of on the pulse of modern society that I think it does an excellent job. And honestly, you would have to be the most like, you know, anti-welfare libertarian, pull yourself up by a bootstraps mentality to really not like the movie, because the movie skews towards, poor people are not lazy or dumb or stupid, and poor people are also not inherently good. The ultimate thing that makes people bad isn't even money in the movie either. Money makes people good. That's one of the kind of tenets of the film, is that money makes people good. But the problem is how do you get the money in a way that you can maintain being a good person? Now, the film doesn't really go into how the dad got his money, that he's like, engaging in fucking wage theft or anything like that. It just shows two families on opposite ends of the wealth spectrum and how their perceptions of experiences are changed solely by wealth. And then if either one were in the other one's situation, they would have a 180 on all their positions. For example, this is done by a flood. In the movie, at one point, it rains really bad, and then the poor family's home is like in a basement, and it gets flooded out. And it's all really terrible, and there's a lot of similarities drawn between this horrible thing that happened back in the rich people's home. There's a lady vomiting in the toilet, and then back in the poor people's home, the sister is sitting on the toilet, and it's like overflowing, and shit's coming out of it, or like black stuff. I don't know. And so there's this interesting kind of metaphor in that scene where the poor family has done damage to another lower class family, and both parties in that struggle to climb up and get access to resources has damaged both of them. And I think that's another part of the film that they do really well, is they don't really scapegoat anybody as being bad or evil. It's just that the inherent kind of moral issue with wealth inequality, with the lacking of opportunity and resources, makes people behave inhumanly to exist at the level that is kind of expected in society. There's a thing that's often talked about among Republican and libertarian minded people that, poor people have it very good and they need to learn to live within their means. And now, if any of those people had any kind of economic understanding, they would quickly realize is that telling somebody to live within their means is essentially shooting the 1% in the foot. Because if you're telling people to stop spending money, the economic engine grinds to a fucking halt. Now, obviously, nobody should be spending money where they have, a bunch of credit cards maxed out and all that kind of shit. But think of the kind of policy that must exist to permit banks to allow people to open up 8 lines of credit. And in fact, lest we not forget, Wells Fargo's policy at their bank was to practically enforce anybody who had an account with them to open 8 lines of credit. How can you say it's the individual's fault for being in debt when credit is so widely available, bad credit too, on fucking credit cards, and it's pushed down people's throats? And, wages have stagnated for fucking like 50 years, and the cost of living has gone through the fucking roof. When you combine all those economic aspects, it's no wonder that so many people are struggling to not just get by, but to grease the wheel of the economic engine. So those people in the companies, like the Jeff Bezos and the fucking Bloombergs, can keep making money. Because if the economic engine stops, if people don't have money to buy and sell stocks, your stock is fucking worthless. So at the end of the day, you need a pool of a ton of people who have the potential to buy your stock, have the interest to do it, and have the potential to buy your products to give value to that stock and your company. And if those people don't exist, and the only people that have the money are the stockholders and the CEOs and the people in the company, but nobody can buy your shit, you're fucked. You need the people at the bottom to be able to buy your shit, to make yourself rich. At some point, the money has to be extracted out of your hands into the lower class so that they can buy your shit again. That's just how it fucking works. If you don't provide a system for them to get enough wages to grease your economic wheel, the pie that you're pulling from will shrink more and more to the point where you own all of it. And when you own all the pie, it essentially, the value of it goes to zero, because nobody else, one, has any, or two, can buy any of your fucking shit. And if nobody can buy your stocks, it's essentially fucking worthless. That's what Redditards always talk about when they say, oh, Jeff Bezos doesn't really have $100 billion. He actually has $100 billion in Amazon stock. And it's like, okay, that's still an insane amount of wealth assets. Like, what the fuck? Like, holy shit, dude. So enough about the economic stuff. Shit. This film can honestly be agonized over for a decade. You could easily do a fucking, PhD thesis in how this film contemporizes economic problems in the world through its metaphors. And the film does a really good job in the beginning, kind of jokingly, where something will happen and the sun will be like, oh, this is so metaphorical. Oh, this is so metaphorical. And you kind of laugh at it. But the film is educating the viewer on how to read the film. When certain things happen that seem meaningless or you don't understand, you're supposed to understand that it's metaphorical. And the things that, quote, seem meaningless or people might not understand, it's not that they're like so abstracted that they don't make sense contextually. Everything that happens in the film makes sense contextually except for like 2 fatal flaws. Excuse me. the two fatal flaws in the film are is that the poor family gets all these like seemingly well-paying tutoring kind of jobs or chauffeur jobs, or they're seemingly taking this family, through the loop. They're seemingly getting a lot of money, but then they never buy a better apartment or do anything with it. So that's one fatal flaw, is that what does the poor family do with all the money they're getting? It's very strange and we're never addressed to that. I don't get it. They I mean, that would have been a whole other story. That would have taken a whole other fucking plot point, and the film's already 2 hours and 20 minutes long. So, whew. And then the other issue is there's a nanny character or a maid who loses her job and then comes back to the house, and this is where the movie kind of gets blown wide open in terms of the craziness. And she looks beat up, and then the poor family is relaxing in the rich people's house because the rich people are out camping, and they just let in the former maid. They don't really have a conversation about it. They don't really say anything like, "Oh, she looks horrible. What happened? Did she get beat up? Oh, is she homeless now? Oh my god, I feel so bad. Oh, maybe we should just let her in for like a little bit to get her things or whatever, you know?" Like, that would be a conversation I could see happening that would justify letting her in. But instead, in the film, we're given nothing. They just let her in, and she looks horrible. Like, and letting her in stands to ruin everything. So they needed to have a better conversation about explaining why they let the maid in, because that was just like a part of the film where you're like, you have it so good. What the fuck are you doing? But I do have a way of justifying the poor people's action. So in the film, we're shown that the rich family is very kind of distant and almost disinterested in each other's lives. And the mom is shown to be naive and simple. So there is this kind of idea that now that the poor family is essentially living like the rich family, they are also kind of becoming naive and not as skeptical of the world because the world doesn't stand to harm them, and they seemingly have a lot of money now, so why would they care? The film could have taken that to a greater extent, and the film does show it to a degree that if the poor family were in the rich family's shoes or vice versa, they would kind of be as shitty. And the rich family really isn't that shitty, but there's ridiculousness to it where the one boy is seen as everything he does as being a genius, even though he's just basically very much indulged upon in his every whim. It kind of the same way that, like, if you ever gone to like a prestigious college or anything like that, or you have any experience with some of the people that you'll meet there, where they clearly have been given a golden fucking spoon and they're only going to the college so they can become manager at their parents' company. These people live a life where everything that they do is fucking, golden shit. It's ridiculous. So, I mean, there's so much to talk about the film, and I could bounce around on topic to topic and fucking every little kind of bit and go through it, and that would be for fucking ever. But really, there's just one part of the film I want to discuss because it's the part of the film that gets memed the most, and it's the part of the film that people seem to struggle to understand on a not superficial level. So there's this theme in the film about basically the poor people and the poor family smelling. Now, this is reinforced in the dad smelling the other dad, who is the chauffeur, and then the mom says that the poor people smell like people on the subway. So there's this kind of ability that even if you, leave your environment, that environment that made you that way, being poor and having that trauma, having fucking drunken people peeing in your window and shit, you can't leave that behind. So the film uses smell as a stand-in for a lot of things, and you have to recognize that. So in the basically climactic scene, there's a character with a knife, and he is also one of the poor smelly people. And I don't mean that to say poor people are smelly, that's just the way the film puts those two attributes together for a stand-in partially of rich resentment of poor people. I'm not saying poor people are smelly, even though unfortunately sometimes they kind of are. So there's a poor person who smells, and it's important to the plot, and he stabs the poor family's daughter. Then poor family dad is trying to, you know, save poor daughter, and then the mom is fighting with the guy who stabbed her. And then there's this really slow mo kind of scene where the dad is looking up and he sees his wife battling the guy, and he's trying to prevent his daughter from bleeding out and dying. And he sees the rich people all scurrying away. And then the rich dad is like, "Oh, give me my keys, give me my keys." Well, first he wants the dad to drive them and leave his dead daughter. He wants him to leave his daughter dying so that they can drive their son who fainted to the hospital. Now, the rich family deserves one little bit of kind of credit, is that they didn't know that the poor family was actually a family. But I believe what the scene is saying is that when shit hits the fan, when the chips are down, rich people do not care if you are bleeding and dying in the street, if they themselves are the least bit inconvenienced. And they will, in their own interests, prioritize their minor inconveniences over your literal death. Because the daughter fucking dies, and all that happened to the fucking rich son was that he fainted. Like, really? And they really over dramatize what happened to the rich son, and that he like had a seizure the first time, and that the mom's like, "Oh, if they have a seizure, they only have 15 minutes to get them to the hospital, or they're done." And it's like, well, it depends on the kind of seizure you're having. If you've ever seen anybody who has a seizure, it depends. Mostly you have the seizure and you get up a little bit afterwards. You're a little super groggy. You should be held down for like, a while, because you need to get your motor functioning back, and your memory basically goes away. They don't remember anybody. Like, but it depends on who's having it and why they're having it. But the son faints, and they choose their fainted son priority over somebody who's literally bleeding out. If you're a normal person, you're like, "Oh, this person's dying. We need to call an ambulance." They don't even do that. They want to drive their fainted son to the hospital. Then nobody even thinks to call 911. But there's another part where the daughter of the rich family is carrying the son of the poor family out of the complex, out of the house, during the whole big event. So there is some bonding between the two classes that can, sever the class disparity that they have. Although the son has a great insecurity about it, and he's like, "Do I belong here? Do I fit in?" And he can pretend, but he can't wash away the smell because it's in his skin so deeply from living in that environment for, 20 some years or whatever, that he would have to live, you know, a year at least outside of that environment to get rid of that, the physical effect of living in that environment in terms of just the smell. But, who's to say of the effect of, the health outcomes and other things like that with the fumigation and other shit that happened? It's impossible to know. It's something you can usually can't remedy in the short term, having an impoverished background like that. So, yeah, in summary, I think the film is ultimately saying is that when the chips are down, when shit's bad, rich people do not care about the suffering of poor people, and they will always prioritize themselves, even if they have the slightest, because of having like a slight, you know, issue to deal with, as opposed to, this poor person's dying in the street, but oh, I got to get to my eye appointment. It's like everybody would do that too, but they're able to live so well because so many people have to live so shittily, because they don't want to be taxed, because they don't want to live in a more equitable society, because they don't want to have investments into other people. And because I think this is the ultimate galaxy brain take about libertarianism and republicanism and low taxes, is that if every person got a fair shot at life, if every person got the same level of investment, you want to know how hard it would be to be a CEO, to be the top of a company, to be actually like a high achiever in society. It would be so fucking difficult because you would be competing against so many more people. Because as it stands right now, the amount of people that are in the higher achieving end of society come from the already highly achieved families in society. So you're only competing against other, essentially rich kids. Like there's not really a path to success for anybody if your family makes below 100K or something. I mean, my parents made like 45K combined. Like, and I wasn't really that poor or anything, but I don't know. The politics in the film seem to be right on. The messaging I thought was really fucking good. It doesn't make itself too unabashedly like, pro poor people, pro rich people, anything like that. Like there are problems with both. And the problem essentially, the money's kind of final theme is the essential problem is money. Is that money can make you nice, money can make you rich, money can make your life easy, but it's what we leave behind in our pursuit of wealth that causes us to have societal decay. If you're willing to leave behind your morality, if you're willing to leave behind your fellow man, then the wealth that you have is really only good to just, I don't know, shove into some stripper's underwear, I suppose, because sure as hell aren't going to live in a more educated society. You aren't going to live in a more healthier society. And those are the prices you pay when people are left behind. And I think that's really, really what the film's going for. But you can really have any kind of interpretation of the movie. It's open to a lot, and there's a lot to dive into. So hopefully I said something that was at least a little bit interesting. I'm sick of shit, so if you got to this point, I should have thought of some kind of funny thing to say, but I didn't actually think of anything. So Baba Booey, Howard Stern's penis. Yep. Thanks.